summer Chicago turned unbearable was the summer. Claire Whitfield stopped sleeping. The city held on to its heat past midnight. Radiating up from the sidewalks like the pavement itself refused to let go of the day, and she lay awake in her apartment on Wells Street, listening to the window unit rattle against a heat it couldn't defeat. She told herself it was the weather keeping her up. She didn't yet know it was him. She met Daniel Reyes on a Tuesday, at the coffee shop 2 blocks from the architecture, firm where she'd worked for 6 years, drawing other people's visions into blueprints, while her own ambitions gathered dust in a drawer. He was sitting at her usual table, the one by the window, sketching something in a battered notebook with a pencil worn down to a stub. She almost asked him to move. Instead, she asked what he was drawing. A bridge that doesn't exist yet, he said, not looking up. Might never exist, but it's nice to imagine it does. She sat across from him without being invited, and he didn't seem surprised. They talked until the barista started stacking chairs. He was a structural engineer between contracts, spending his open weeks the way some people spend inheritance, carefully on things that mattered only to him. She told him about the promotion she'd been passed over for. He told her the bridge was for his father, who had died before Daniel ever built anything real, and this was the version of atonement available to him now. She didn't tell anyone about him, not because there was anything to hide, not yet, but because some things felt too fragile to survive being spoken aloud, like frost that melts the moment breath touches it. She was, after all, engaged. Michael was steady, was kind, was the kind of certainty she'd told herself she wanted at 29, tired of the ache of not knowing. The wedding was 11 weeks away. The heat that summer was inside her as much as it was in the streets. She saw Daniel again by accident, or what she called accident, at the same coffee shop the following week, and then it stopped being accidental, because she started going at the same time every day, and he was always there, like the tide agreeing to a schedule. They never called it anything. That was the unspoken rule between them, though neither of them had spoken it. Whatever this was, it existed in a category without a name, a heat without a source, present but unaccounted for. One evening in July, walking along the river after one of their coffee shop, conversations had stretched past closing. Daniel stopped on a bridge, an actual one, not the imagined kind, and looked down at the water, catching the last orange light of the day. I looked her up, he said. Your fiancé's name, Instagram, he looks like a good man. Claire's stomach dropped the particular way it does when someone says the thing. You've both been circling. He is, she said. Then I don't know what we're doing. Neither do I. He turned to face her, and for a moment the city noise fell away. The honking and the construction and the distant thrum of the L train. And there was only the heat between them, rising off the concrete, off her skin, off whatever this was that refused every name she tried to give it. I'm not going to kiss you, he said. Not because I don't want to, because if I do, I don't think either of us survives it clean. She went home that night and lay in bed next to the ring Michael had given her, sitting in its box on the nightstand, because she'd started taking it off before sleep, telling herself it was because of the heat, the metal too warm against her skin. She knew, lying there, that it wasn't about the ring's temperature at all. August came, and with it the wedding invitations, already sent, already RSVP'd, 140 people who believed in a version of her life. She was no longer certain she believed in herself. Michael noticed the distance before she admitted it existed. He wasn't a fool. He asked her one night over dinner she'd barely touched if she still wanted this, and she said yes too quickly, the way people do when the truth would take longer to explain than they have patience for. She stopped seeing Daniel for 2 weeks. She told herself it was the responsible thing, the decent thing, and for 14 days she did not go to the coffee shop, did not walk near the bridge, rearranged her entire routine around avoiding a man she had no claim to and no right to miss as much as she did. On the 15th day she broke and went, and he wasn't there, and something in her chest cracked open at the absence of him, in a way that told her everything she'd been refusing to hear. She found him 3 days later, not at the coffee shop, but at the actual bridge, the unfinished one from his notebook, except it wasn't unfinished anymore. It existed now as a small model, welded and precise, sitting on a folding table he'd set up near the riverbank, like a man displaying evidence. I finished it, he said. For my father, seemed like the summer for finishing things, or starting them, Claire said, and she felt the truth of her own sentence land in her chest before her mind had caught up to it. Claire. Her name from him always sounded like a question. I need you to say something true. Just once, not careful, true. She thought of Michael, of the kindness that had never once made her feel the way she felt standing on that riverbank in the dying light of August, unsteady and certain all at once. She thought of the ring on her nightstand, cooling now that autumn was coming, and the wedding invitations already stamped and sent, and the 140 people who would need explanations she didn't yet have the words for. I don't want the life I already agreed to, she said. I think I've known since the day you were drawing a bridge that didn't exist. I think I wanted to be the thing you built next. Daniel didn't move for a long moment, and she watched something in his face give way, the careful architecture of restraint he'd built around himself for 2 months finally, buckling under its own weight. I've been in love with you since the second week, he said. I told myself it didn't count if neither of us said it. It counted, Claire said. It's counted this whole time. The kiss, when it came, wasn't the reckless collision she might have imagined months earlier. It was slow, deliberate, like something being built rather than something breaking. And the heat that had followed her all summer, through sleepless nights and coffee shop afternoons and 100 half admissions, finally had a place to go. The following weeks were not simple. Nothing worth having usually is. She called off the wedding in a conversation with Michael. That left them both crying in a kitchen that no longer felt like it belonged to either of them, and she meant every apology she gave him, because kindness deserves acknowledgement even when it isn't enough to build a life on. Her mother didn't speak to her for 3 weeks. Friends took sides they had no right to take. She lost the version of her future that everyone else had already been comfortable with, and she gained in its place something that had no name yet, something she and Daniel were still building. Plank by plank, the way you build a bridge, not knowing exactly where the other side will land until you're standing on it. By October, the Chicago heat had finally broken, replaced by the kind of clean cold that makes a person feel like they can breathe fully, for the first time in months. Claire stood with Daniel on the same bridge where he'd first refused to kiss her, watching the small model of his father's bridge sitting, now on a shelf in his apartment, finished, no longer imagined. Still don't have a name for this, Daniel said, meaning the two of them standing there with their hands intertwined against the cold. Maybe it doesn't need one, Claire said. Maybe it's just the thing we're building. The heat we couldn't name? He laughed low and warm, the kind of laugh that had once undone her across a coffee shop table over a stranger's sketch of an impossible bridge. The heat we couldn't name, he repeated. I could live with that. They stood there as the city moved around them, indifferent and enormous. Two people who had found each other in the space between certainty and chaos, who had chosen the harder true thing over the easier false one, and who now, for the first time since the summer began, felt entirely, quietly, unmistakably at peace.